Some people think love means holding tighter, gripping harder, being afraid of losing what you care about, but real love doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding that nothing truly meant for you needs to be chained to you. Love without attachment is not cold, it's not distant, it's brave, it's choosing someone every day, not because you're afraid to be alone, but because you are complete even in silence. Today, we're not here to learn how to possess love. We're here to learn how to free it, to love deeply, honestly, and peacefully without losing ourselves in the process, because the strongest love is the one that can let go and still remain whole. Love without attachment is one of the hardest things a human being will ever try to understand, because we are taught early that love means holding on, protecting, claiming, proving, defending, and sometimes even suffering. We grow up believing that if love doesn't hurt, it isn't real, and if it doesn't cost us our peace, it must be shallow. But that idea doesn't come from wisdom. It comes from fear. Fear of being left, fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough on our own. Attachment begins the moment love becomes a transaction. When we say, "I'll love you as long as you stay," when we say, "I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel secure," when love turns into a contract written by insecurity, it stops being love and becomes control, wearing a gentle mask. Love without attachment doesn't mean you care less. It means you care without trying to own. It means you choose presence over possession. It means you allow another person to exist fully, freely, without shrinking them to fit your fears. And that kind of love requires something most people avoid their entire lives: self-awareness. When you are attached, you don't actually see the other person clearly. You see them through the lens of what they provide for you: comfort, validation, identity, purpose, distraction from your loneliness. And the moment they stop providing those things in the way you expect, love starts to feel threatened. Not because they changed, but because your dependency was exposed. Attachment is subtle. It doesn't always look like obsession or jealousy. Sometimes it looks like constant checking in. Sometimes it looks like sacrifice that was never asked for. Sometimes it looks like loyalty that silently demands repayment. And sometimes it looks like staying in situations that slowly erase you, because leaving feels scarier than losing yourself. Love without attachment begins with understanding that no one is responsible for completing you. No one was sent into your life to save you from yourself. People are not medicine for unhealed wounds. They are companions, not cures. When you place the burden of your happiness on another human being, you turn love into pressure, and pressure over time suffocates everything. There is a quiet strength in loving someone while knowing you would survive without them. Not because you don't value them, but because you value yourself enough not to disappear inside another person. This kind of love doesn't beg. It doesn't cling. It doesn't manipulate silence or affection to gain reassurance. It stands calmly and says, "I choose you, but I don't need to cage you." Attachment says, "Don't leave me." Love without attachment says, "Be free, and if you stay, let it be real." Most people confuse attachment with commitment. They think letting go of attachment means avoiding depth, but the truth is the opposite. Attachment is shallow because it's driven by fear. Love without attachment is deep because it's driven by truth. It allows closeness without collapse, intimacy without identity loss. When you love without attachment, you stop monitoring, you stop keeping score, you stop measuring effort, you stop demanding constant reassurance, you listen more, you observe more, you trust the natural rhythm of connection. And when something changes, you don't panic, you pay attention. Attachment reacts, love responds. Attachment says, "This is happening to me." Love says, "This is happening, let me understand it." There's a moment in every relationship when reality replaces fantasy, when the person stops being an idea and starts being human. Attachment resists that moment. It wants the fantasy back. Love accepts the human and adjusts with compassion. To love without attachment is to allow disappointment without turning it into resentment. It is to feel hurt without turning it into control. It is to experience fear without letting it dictate your behavior. This doesn't mean you ignore red flags or tolerate disrespect. It means you don't abandon your self-respect just to keep someone close. You can love someone deeply and still walk away when the connection no longer honors who you are. That isn't coldness, that is clarity. Attachment stays because it is afraid of emptiness. Love leaves when staying requires self-betrayal. There is nothing romantic about losing yourself for someone who isn't trying to find you. There is nothing noble about suffering in silence to preserve an image of love that only exists in your mind. Love without attachment understands that pain is information, not a command to endure endlessly. When you stop attaching, you stop chasing potential. You stop falling in love with who someone could be if they healed, changed, or chose differently. You start loving who they are right now without illusions, and if who they are cannot meet you with honesty, presence, or respect, love doesn't argue with reality. Attachment tries to negotiate with reality. Love accepts it. This kind of love is calm. It doesn't rush timelines. It doesn't demand promises to feel secure. It doesn't force outcomes. It allows things to unfold, trusting that what is aligned will remain and what isn't will fall away without needing to be destroyed. Love without attachment understands impermanence. It knows that everything changes, including people, feelings, and circumstances. And instead of fighting that truth, it flows with it. It cherishes moments without trying to freeze them. It appreciates connection without trying to guarantee forever. Forever cannot be forced. It can only be chosen again and again. When you love without attachment, you stop fearing endings so intensely, not because endings don't hurt, but because you trust yourself to survive them. You know that loss does not erase your worth. You know that absence does not define your value. You know that being alone is not the same as being unlovable. Attachment believes separation equals failure. Love understands separation can be a form of honesty. There is freedom in knowing that you don't need tea. Oh, hold on tightly to be loved. That love is not something you trap, but something you nurture, like a bird that stays, not because the door is locked, but because the environment feels safe enough to return to. When you stop attaching, you stop confusing anxiety with passion. You stop mistaking emotional chaos for depth. You stop thinking that intensity equals intimacy. Real intimacy is quiet. It is consistent. It is safe enough to breathe in. Love without attachment doesn't play games. It doesn't test loyalty through silence. It doesn't provoke jealousy to feel desired. It communicates directly, listens carefully, and respects boundaries, even when doing so feels uncomfortable. Attachment fears boundaries. Love respects them. This form of love begins within. It starts the moment you take responsibility for your own emotional world, when you stop expecting someone else to regulate your feelings, when you stop outsourcing your self-worth, when you stop asking another person to make life meaningful for you. You bring meaning with you. Love adds to it. It does not replace it. When you love without attachment, you become less reactive. You don't jump to conclusions. You don't assume abandonment at the first sign of distance. You don't collapse into panic when things feel uncertain. You remain grounded, curious, open. You allow space without interpreting it as rejection. You allow silence without filling it with stories. And in that space, something rare happens. Trust grows, not blind trust, but earned trust. The kind that comes from consistency, honesty, and emotional responsibility, the kind that doesn't need constant proof because it feels steady. Attachment is loud. Love, quiet. Attachment demands certainty. Love tolerates ambiguity. This kind of love doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. It means you allow people to show you who they are without forcing them into roles they never agreed to play. It means you listen when actions and words don't align, and you believe what you see instead of what you hope. Love without attachment doesn't try to rescue. It doesn't try to fix. It doesn't try to carry someone else's healing on its back. It offers support, not sacrifice. It offers presence, not self-erasure. When you stop attaching, you stop confusing loyalty with endurance. You stop staying just to prove how much you can tolerate. You start choosing relationships that feel mutual, balanced, and alive. This love doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't shrink to be chosen. It doesn't compete. It stands in its truth and allows alignment to happen naturally. And if alignment doesn't happen, it doesn't chase. It lets go with dignity because love without attachment knows one thing very clearly. You can open your heart without handing someone the keys to your identity. You can love deeply without abandoning yourself. You can care without control. You can stay without fear. You can leave without hatred. You can hold space without losing ground. You can feel without being consumed. You can connect without collapsing. You can love without attachment. Most people don't realize they are attached until love begins to slip through their fingers. Attachment hides comfortably inside routine, familiarity, and emotional investment. It feels safe at first. It feels like closeness, but over time it reveals itself through anxiety, through the need for reassurance, through the fear that rises whenever something feels uncertain. Attachment doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers quietly, telling you that without this person, something inside you would fall apart. Love without attachment begins with the courage to sit with that fear instead of running from it, to ask yourself why the idea of losing someone feels like losing yourself, to recognize that what hurts is not only the potential absence of another person, but the absence of the identity you built around them. When love is attached, it becomes heavy. It carries expectations, unspoken agreements, imagined futures, and silent demands. It starts asking questions that don't come from curiosity, but from insecurity. Questions meant to confirm safety rather than deepen understanding. And slowly, love turns into vigilance, watching, monitoring, interpreting tone, timing, distance. Love without attachment releases the need to monitor. It understands that trust cannot grow under surveillance. It knows that affection forced by fear is not affection at all. When you love freely, you allow the other person to move, to change, to evolve, without seeing every shift as a threat. Attachment wants guarantees. Love accepts uncertainty. There is no promise that can fully protect the heart, no commitment that can eliminate risk. Loving someone is always an act of vulnerability, but attachment tries to ensure that vulnerability by tightening control. Love without attachment understands that control does not reduce pain. It only delays it and multiplies it when it arrives. To love without attachment is to stop trying to secure the future through emotional leverage, to stop believing that if you do enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, someone will stay forever. People stay because they choose to, not because they are indebted to your effort. Attachment keeps records. Love stays present. When you are attached, love becomes conditional without you realizing it. Conditions disguised as loyalty, expectations disguised as care. You may say you accept someone as they are, but internally you are waiting for them to change, to grow in a specific direction, to fulfill a role that makes you feel safe. Love without attachment does not wait for transformation as a requirement. It does not hold love hostage until potential becomes reality. It sees what is, not what could be. And if what is does not align, it does not bargain with hope. This kind of love understands that longing does not equal connection. Missing someone does not mean you belong together. Desire alone is not proof of compatibility. Attachment often confuses intensity with truth. Love without attachment looks for stability, honesty, and emotional presence beneath the surface emotion. There is a deep loneliness that can exist inside attachment, a loneliness that comes from depending on another person to regulate your inner world. When they are close, you feel whole. When they pull away even slightly, everything feels unstable. Love without attachment breaks this cycle by teaching you how to stay grounded regardless of proximity. It teaches you to feel your emotions without handing them to someone else, to experience love without making it your only source of meaning. When you stop attaching, you stop fearing space. You understand that space does not automatically mean distance, and distance does not always mean loss. Sometimes space is where clarity forms. Sometimes it is where individuality breathes. Love that cannot tolerate space is not closeness. It is fusion. Fusion erases edges. Love respects them. Love without attachment allows two whole individuals to meet without collapsing into one another. It allows disagreement without threatening connection. It allows silence without panic. It allows independence without jealousy. Attachment reacts emotionally to everything. A delayed reply becomes a story. A change in tone becomes a warning. A shift in routine becomes evidence. Love without attachment pauses before reacting. It asks questions. It listens. It separates facts from fears. This doesn't mean you become passive or detached from your feelings. It means you stop letting your fears lead your behavior. You feel, but you don't spiral. You care, but you don't chase. You speak, but you don't beg. There is dignity in that. When love is attached, boundaries feel like rejection. Limits feel like threats. Independence feels like abandonment. Love without attachment sees boundaries as information. It understands that limits are not walls, but guides for how to love someone without losing yourself. You don't need access to every thought, every emotion, every moment to feel connected. Real connection does not require constant availability. It requires honesty when presence is offered. Attachment wants constant reassurance of importance. Love finds security in consistency. This kind of love understands that people express care differently. It does not demand that love be shown in one specific language. It observes patterns rather than isolated moments. It looks at how someone treats you over time, not how they make you feel in emotional peaks. Attachment is addicted to peaks. Love values steadiness. To love without attachment is to stop proving your worth through endurance, to stop believing that staying through pain is the highest form of love. Pain is not a currency. Suffering does not earn loyalty. Endurance without reciprocity leads to resentment, not intimacy. You are allowed to choose peace without guilt. You are allowed to walk away without hatred. Attachment makes leaving feel like failure, like giving up, like losing something that defines you. Love without attachment understands that leaving can be an act of respect for yourself and the other person. It acknowledges when connection turns into harm, even if feelings remain. Love does not demand that you stay where you are shrinking. It does not require you to abandon your values to preserve proximity. When you love without attachment, you stop fighting reality. You stop arguing with what is clearly being shown to you. You stop interpreting inconsistency as mystery or depth. You stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. You begin to value clarity over chemistry, safety over sparks, presence over pursuit. This kind of love does not disappear when conflict arises. It does not withdraw to punish. It does not use distance as leverage. It stays engaged, communicative, and respectful even when things are difficult. Attachment withdraws to protect itself. Love stays present to understand. When you stop attaching, you stop confusing being needed with being loved. Someone can need you deeply and still not love you in a healthy way. Someone can love you quietly without depending on you to survive. Love without attachment allows others to stand on their own. It does not feel threatened by their strength or independence. It does not need to be indispensable to feel valuable. You are valuable because you exist, not because you are required. This love also allows you to be seen clearly. It does not hide behind performance. It does not constantly adjust to avoid conflict or rejection. It shows up honestly, trusting that alignment will happen or it won't without force. When you love without attachment, you stop chasing validation. You stop trying to be chosen at the expense of your truth. You stop auditioning for love. You show up as you are, and you observe who stays. Attachment clings to familiarity even when it hurts. Love without attachment chooses growth even when it is uncomfortable. It understands that comfort is not the same as health. This love is rooted in self-respect, not pride, not ego, but a quiet knowing of your own worth. It does not need to be loud. It does not need to convince. It simply is. And because it is not driven by fear, it becomes generous. It gives without expecting return. It supports without controlling outcome. It listens without planning defense. It understands that people come into your life for different seasons, not all meant to stay forever. And it does not see this as tragedy, but as truth. Nothing real is wasted. No genuine connection is meaningless. Love without attachment allows gratitude instead of bitterness. It allows memory without longing. It allows appreciation without possession. It lets you say, "This mattered," without needing to say, "This must last." And in that space, love becomes lighter, breathable, honest, human, not something you grip with trembling hands, but something you hold gently, knowing that whatever is real will not require force to remain. There is a moment in every life when love asks a difficult question, not out loud, but deep inside the chest, a question that doesn't come with instructions or reassurance. It asks whether you are loving from fullness or from lack, whether your care is an offering or a request, whether your presence is a choice or a dependency disguised as devotion. Most people never pause long enough to answer honestly. They rush toward connection, hoping it will quiet the unease within them. They lean into relationships, searching for stability, meaning, and confirmation that they matter. And there is nothing wrong with wanting connection. The problem begins when connection becomes a substitute for self-understanding. Attachment forms when love is asked to do a job it was never meant to do, to heal wounds it didn't create, to provide identity, to erase loneliness, to fix insecurity. When love becomes responsible for your inner balance, it slowly turns into a burden, even if it started beautifully. Love without attachment begins with the willingness to face yourself without an audience, to sit in silence without reaching for another person to fill it, to know your own thoughts, fears, and patterns well enough that you don't ask someone else to carry them for you. When love is attached, it is restless, it needs confirmation, it scans for signs, it looks for reassurance in words, gestures, and consistency. And the moment something feels off, it tightens. It tries to restore balance by holding closer, asking more questions, demanding clarity before clarity is ready to exist. Love without attachment is patient with uncertainty. It understands that clarity cannot be forced. It allows answers to arrive in their own time. It listens to what is being shown instead of interrogating what is not being said. Attachment interprets silence as danger. Love listens to silence without panic. This kind of love does not rush emotional timelines. It does not demand depth before trust has been built. It does not confuse vulnerability with immediacy. It allows connection to grow at a pace that feels natural instead of dramatic. There's a calm confidence in loving without attachment, not arrogance, not emotional distance, but a grounded presence that does not collapse under doubt, a sense of inner steadiness that does not depend on constant affirmation from outside. When you love without attachment, you stop needing to be chosen to feel valuable. You stop measuring your worth through someone else's attention. You stop shrinking or performing to keep a connection alive. You remain yourself even when that feels risky. Attachment fears authenticity because authenticity risks rejection. Love without attachment understands that rejection of your truth is not a loss, it is information. This love allows people to reveal themselves fully. It does not interrupt their process. It does not pressure them to become what you hope they might be. It gives space for honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. You don't try to convince someone to see your value. You let them see it or not. When love is attached, disagreement feels threatening. Conflict feels like a crack that could break everything apart. Love without attachment sees conflict as a doorway, a chance to understand differences without assigning blame or fear. It doesn't avoid difficult conversations. It doesn't weaponize them either. This love speaks clearly, not aggressively. It listens without preparing defense. It expresses needs without turning them into ultimatums. It understands that communication is not about winning, but about revealing truth. Attachment tries to preserve connection at any cost. Love preserves integrity. When you love without attachment, you don't abandon your boundaries to keep peace. You don't tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness. You don't silence yourself to maintain harmony that only exists on the surface. Peace that requires self-erasure is not peace. Connection that demands betrayal of self is not love. This form of love understands that people can care deeply and still be incompatible. That chemistry does not guarantee alignment. That affection does not automatically mean shared values, timing, or emotional capacity. Attachment ignores these truths because it is afraid of loss. Love acknowledges them because it values honesty more than illusion. There is grief in that honesty. Letting go of what you wanted something to be can hurt deeply. Love without attachment allows that grief without turning it into bitterness. It lets disappointment pass through without hardening the heart. You can feel sadness without becoming cynical. You can feel loss without becoming closed. This love does not harden itself for protection. It does not build walls, it builds roots. Roots that keep you steady even when the ground shifts. When you stop attaching, you stop fearing endings as personal failures. You understand that some connections end not because someone was wrong, but because the season changed. You allow relationships to be meaningful without them ending permanence. Nothing real disappears just because it ends. Its impact remains, quietly shaping who you become. Love without attachment allows appreciation without ownership. It lets you be grateful for what was shared without clinging to what no longer exists. It honors memory without living inside it. This love also changes how you show up. You become less reactive, less defensive, less driven by fear of abandonment. You stop trying to control outcomes through emotional pressure. You let people be where they are. You meet them there or you don't. Attachment often confuses effort with love. The more you give, the more you believe you deserve something in return. Love without attachment gives freely or not at all. It does not keep score. It does not expect repayment. If something is given with expectation, it is not a gift. It is a contract. This love understands that not everyone has the capacity to meet you where you are. And instead of taking that personally, it takes it seriously. It listens to behavior. It observes patterns. It believes consistency more than promises. Attachment holds on to words. Love watches actions. When you love without attachment, you don't chase mixed signals. You don't interpret confusion as depth. You don't romanticize emotional unavailability. You respect clarity, even when clarity means walking away. This does not make you cold. It makes you honest. Love without attachment does not beg for effort. It does not convince someone to care. It does not plead for presence. It understands that mutual desire does not need persuasion. You don't have to fight to be chosen. You align with those who already see you. This love is gentle, but it is an OT weak. It can say no without guilt. It can leave without hatred. It can stay without fear. It can love without losing itself. It does not rush healing. It does not shame vulnerability. It does not punish honesty. When you love without attachment, you become safer to love because you are not asking someone to complete you. You are inviting them to walk beside you. And walking beside someone is lighter than carrying them. This love creates space for growth, not forced growth, not growth demanded by threat of loss, but growth that arises naturally from feeling seen, respected, and free. Attachment tries to grow through pressure. Love grows through safety. There is a quiet maturity in understanding that love does not have to last forever to be real, that its value is not measured by duration, but by authenticity, that something can be meaningful even if it is temporary. This understanding softens you. It removes desperation. It removes urgency. It allows you to be present instead of predictive. You stop living 5 steps ahead trying to protect yourself from imagined futures. You live here, now, with awareness. Love without attachment does not ask for guarantees. It does not need promises written in stone. It trusts the present moment enough to remain open without demanding certainty. And if the moment changes, it adjusts. It does not cling to what no longer fits. This love knows that holding too tightly can destroy what you are trying to protect. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is loosen your grip and allow truth to surface. Truth does not need force. It needs space. When you love without attachment, you understand that your heart is strong enough to feel deeply without breaking permanently. That pain will visit, but it will not define you. That loss will shape you, but it will not erase you. You stop loving from fear of being alone. You start loving from choice. And in that choice, love becomes something steady, something quiet, something real. Not dramatic, not desperate, not consuming, just present, just honest, just human. Not something you use to escape yourself, but something you share after you have found your footing within yourself. Not something you cling to for survival, but something you offer from wholeness. And in that space, love exists without attachment. Love becomes complicated the moment it starts negotiating with fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough once the excitement fades. These fears don't make someone weak, they make someone human. But when fear is allowed to lead love, attachment quietly takes control, shaping behavior in ways that feel protective but slowly become restrictive. Most attachment doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It looks responsible, it looks caring, it looks like commitment. But inside, it is often driven by an unspoken belief that without this person, something essential would collapse. That belief creates tension because no relationship can safely carry the weight of someone else's emotional survival. Love without attachment begins when you stop asking love to rescue you from yourself, when you stop using connection as a shield against your own emptiness, when you understand that another person can walk with you, but they cannot walk for you. When love is attached, it listens selectively. It hears what reassures and ignores what challenges. It explains away inconsistency. It softens red flags. It tells itself stories to avoid facing uncomfortable truths. Love without attachment listens fully, even when what it hears disrupts hope.